Hello and welcome to the Christian Study Abroad podcast. My name is Greg Belgum, and I'm serving as your host today. I serve as the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships here at Living and Learning International, and I'm excited to be joined by Dr. Micah Hughes. Micah has become a great friend over the last 5 years as we've had the joy of working together, but his story goes back much further than that. He grew up for most of his childhood in Egypt and then attended Wheaton College for undergrad. And then for 17 years, from 2003 until 2020, he served in public health education in Uganda. And 5 of those years, he was on staff with the CCCU, helping run the global health track at the Uganda Studies program. And over the last 5 years, he's been based in Baltimore City and serving as the program director for Living and Learning East Coast at the Baltimore Urban Studies Center. So Micah, welcome to the podcast, and it's good to have a conversation with you today.
Thank you, Greg. It's great to be on.
Well, hey, to kick things off, I know you have so many global stories, but I wanted to ask about one. Would you tell us one of your most significant memories traveling? And then tell us, what was it about that moment that really sticks with you to this day?
Great question. Well, after hearing you kind of talk about my history in Uganda, I think maybe I'll share that first story. I think having had the gift of growing up in the Middle East, I did a lot of travel through my middle school, through my high school, traveled around a lot of Europe and a lot of sub-Saharan Africa. So I underestimated when I studied abroad as a student at Wheaton College, kind of the moments of transformation and how profound it would be. But I was really excited. I was studying biology and anthropology, and I did the program called Human Needs and Global Resources. And that program is an immersive program. And so I can still remember the date, but on June 4th of 2003, I stepped off of the airplane in northern Uganda, had to take those international flights, and then get on a very small plane and landed on a dirt runway. And waiting at the airport was an amazing elder named Isaac Nguyo. And he greeted me on the red tarmac. And then I spent my first day with him. And it was really an awareness of, I am about to spend 6 months in northern Uganda doing a research academic project, and this is so far out of my comfort zone and of what I had ever experienced before. So it was just deeply humbling. It was honoring, and it was really exciting. And from those 6 months, that became truly a life transformative experience for me, spiritually, academically, and professionally. And I went on to really stay connected to the region for the next 17 years after that.
What I love about that story is the specificity. I think there's something about getting out of our home context, getting out of the normalcy, that it's like crystal clear in our brains and in our memory. And so, yeah, I mean, I think anybody listening probably has some of those key moments where they're like, yeah, the first time I stepped off that airplane, the smells, the sounds, maybe the air feels, the moisture in the air feels different. So some of those pieces stick with us in such profound ways. And in the midst of that, there can be a lot of really good learning opportunities if done well and done thoughtfully. Today's conversation, we're going to be digging into the experiential learning cycle, which has had some different iterations over time. Would you share with us what experiential learning, the framework is, and how that informs some of your practice?
Yes, I'd love to. Well, I happen to be a father to 2 daughters, so I love telling the story of David Kolb and Alice Kolb, who researched, developed, and have authorship over the first experiential learning theory, because it's a daddy-daughter story. So David Kolb, he had been working and teaching at Harvard, and his daughter was at Case Western. She went on then to be at MIT, And they started doing research together in 1981. They co-founded something called experience-based learning systems. And from 81 to 84, they did these 3 years of research on why is experiential learning significant. Um, and then in 1984, they published the inaugural kind of publication of experiential learning theory. So they together coined that. And it's called Kolb's learning cycle. And I think often people attribute it to David Kolb, but if you dig into the research, it was a daddy daughter project between David and Alice Kolb. And their learning cycle has 4 phases. First is the concrete experience. You actually, engage in something that's tangible, like you said, sights, smells, experiences. Then you need to have a reflection where you're kind of thinking about what you just physically experienced. That's called reflective observation. After that, you go into abstract conceptualization. So that's when you try to make a theory, you make meaning of it. Today, in qualitative research, we call it the meaning making process. And then, like all good cycles, you enter into active experimentation, which is now you had the first concrete experience, you reflected on it, you applied it to theory, and now in the 4th phase, it's active experimentation. So you're trying to test out those meaning making concepts into action. And of course, boom. So testing it out, you go back in and you work around the cycle.
I love that. One of the things I've heard you say a lot over the years is if it's worth doing, it's worth debriefing. And I mean, that's all over 2 and probably 3, right? As it goes both of those stages. So yeah, integrating debriefing. What did we just do? What did we experience? How did that make you feel? Like all of those pieces are super powerful. Okay, so that's the kind of some of the early phases of experiential learning theory. But there's a newer framework that's been developed that also informs kind of how you go about some of your teaching and program directorship.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so in um, having the gift to now be in the heart of Baltimore City, working with Living and Learning, we take students and they have very multicultural, cross-cultural experiences in Baltimore and Washington, D.C., and Philadelphia and New York. And so it's not studying a one culture where you're like, we need to study Spanish because I'm going to be in Ecuador, or let's learn Arabic while we're in Egypt. It's kind of an intersectionality of academics, lived, embodied experiences, and multicultures. And so while doing this work, I came across a different model that uses a snail illustration, and it was put out by an Italian experiential learning nonprofit called Pensate. And the Pensate experiential learning model has many more phases. And what's really interesting is the first phase is discomfort. And so we could, articulate on the power of that. But when our students are excited, they're going to do internships that connect from DC to New York. Most of our young people are here for that field experience. And while the honeymoon emotion is still high, we introduce them to the Pensate model and just describe that discomfort is going to be the first step to meaningful experiential learning. And from that discomfort, students enter the second phase, which is asking powerful questions. So if they can realize that they're going to move into some areas that are uncomfortable, that will lead them to meaningful question asking. And then the third phase is active listening. So we talk about how the primary text is our context. But before you can read that text, you need to at least go through these first three steps of experiential learning. Realizing there are some things that are uncomfortable, very different than your previous academic learning. Now you ask questions connected to the context, and now you're ready to actively listen or read the context. And then you go from there through similar phases of the cycle. Um, the fourth step is sharing. So, what I love about that is living and learning's model is really based on learning in community. And so, students sharing together just fits perfectly with this model. That actually, whether you're an internal process or external processor, written reflections and verbal reflections just fit this model really well. And then that moves into reflection and action. Um, so the model is really powerful, and I really encourage people to check out Penn Soate and the work that they've done, and how it works really well for interdisciplinary learning.
Yeah, and we'll have a link to this diagram in the show notes. So I'd encourage you to check it out and spend some time pulling up this diagram and the snail that pulls you further and further out and around. It does continue to go a little bit further, Mike. So would you bring us through those last four cycles after action? It continues to go, and what happens once you start to do some action?
Beautiful. So as you know, our learners are entering into that embodied active experiential learning, which means they're taking the theory of the classroom into practice. Then they enter the seventh phase of the cycle, which is group and individual assessment. So it's just perfect for the higher learning context where students can see from the beginning, okay, I'm going to start with some discomfort. I'm going to work through these cycles. And then, oh, assessment is not because we're just grading for the sake of grading, but actually that's a key step in carrying reflection into the academic level so that they can get feedback, see where they can grow. And after having group and individual assessment, they go to the eighth phase, which is change for transformation. And this is what, our learners want. They're excited about transformational learning, like having, what some people say a life-changing experience is exemplar of transformation. And then the next stage is a state of balance. And I love that the final stage, a state of balance, kind of how that, looking back where we started with discomfort, the goal is not to just push our learners through kind of this painful deconstructive process, but that we're looking for holistic kind of, mind, body, and soul learning and transformation that can have greater balance, or as a lot of other authors put, like living in the tensions of our time, not going, into one single place, but living that out. And after that, from that state of balance, then as we always do in every good cycle, we begin again.
Yeah, one of the things I'm even thinking about as you're talking through this is if someone on their own gets on an airplane, goes to another place, lands there, experiences some discomfort, some disorientation, stays on the ground there for some amount of time, has some serendipitous run-ins, maybe some moments they put their foot in their mouth, and then they get on an airplane and they come back. They will probably have some learning that takes place during that experience.
Mm,
But what it's missing is some of these key parts that a guide, somebody who's been there before,
mm,
that can kind of see the big picture,
mm,
and really understand, hey, what you're going through is normal. Sit
mm,
in that. Don't eject. Don't pull out your phone. Don't
mm,
run. Don't stay isolated in your room.
mm,
Like let's go. The discomfort's okay, and it's actually normal and part of this process. I
yeah,
do think there's such an aversion to discomfort in
mm,
society and culture right now that we want to do anything we can to avoid discomfort. And yet you've mentioned it multiple times that that's a starting point here. So, um, yeah, in your vocation, in your profession, you do serve as that guide, helping people walk through that,
Mm.
through this life cycle. Can you tell us maybe about a time where you saw a particular student or individual kind of walk through this, and you could kind of see what was one or two steps ahead for them,
Mm.
understanding this framework and how it's coming, but maybe they didn't see what was ahead for themselves?
Oh, that's a great question. I think, yeah, it really every student goes through this in a different way and different stage. I think one student that comes to mind um, was a female student. She was also from Wheaton College. She came to Baltimore because she really wanted to pursue physical therapy graduate school. And so she wasn't as conscious of entering this multicultural context or where she was entering. Some of our students are actively engaging multicultural urban living. This particular student was excited about the internship. And what was so special is she completed an internship at Kennedy Krieger, which is pediatric rehabilitation and kind of a really special opportunity. But she went through all the stages of the cycle of saying, wait, I have to take public transportation like through Baltimore City to get to this internship site, and learning how to navigate the public buses, um, kind of communicate and learn crossing several cultures of what she occupied, kind of her identity, the learning environment, the patients, their cultural background. But she really was open and desiring to grow and to learn. And she just progressed through this Pensoete snail model of experiential learning beautifully with tough questions about herself. Why do I feel this way? Why am I afraid? I see other children on the public bus. Why am I afraid? I'm a university student. And in asking some really profound questions, and she just thrived through her experience as she did that in community, kind of getting feedback from, our social work faculty, our public health faculty, from our theologian, like really seeing the interdisciplinary gift of experiential learning, where she first came for one very distinct goal. She had some really deep learning. Um, and then we're excited that after she graduated, she kind of called us up and was excited to share that during her whole interview, what everyone was most intrigued by was her time in Baltimore City and her learning at Kennedy Krieger. And she got into University of Chicago's doctoral program in physical therapy. So it's a really short abbreviated story, but we see that when students are willing to go through this process together with their peers and with faculty advisors, it does have transformational learning outcomes.
Yeah, I love that story. And that's like the ideal story. That's the success story. But there are times where students probably like bounce out of this learning cycle and the learning maybe doesn't happen. Are there key moments along here where you've seen there's barriers that seem to repeat themselves? And what
Hmm.
are some of those barriers that maybe repeat themselves that keep people from kind of being able to move all the way through?
That's excellent. That's excellent. I think one of the things that we've seen is that this process of experiential learning kind of leads students down three possible outcomes. Craig Storty has written a great book called The Art of Crossing Cultures. And Storty talks about after you've had these deeply embodied multicultural, cross cultural experiences, you're going to tend to either assimilate and just kind of, that was hard. I just want to go back to what I knew before. And you assimilate back. Or you have this profound experience and now you kind of alienate. You're judging others. Maybe you're judging yourself and you alienate. Or the third option is integrate. the experiential learning and you integrate it through. And the real talk that we talk with all of our students is that all of us, whether we've been doing this for 5 months or for 20 plus years, I find myself on the daily having experiences where I tend to just want to assimilate or I want to alienate and be cynical. Um, and so it's not that you only do one of the three, but even within a day, you're going to have experiences of assimilation, experiences of alienation, and then prayerfully and as a community, we can have integrative moments where we go through that process. So I find a lot of students, as they have that discomfort and they're asking hard questions and they're moving through the cycle, even as they're starting to reflect and have some active learning, they'll hop right back into focusing on the discomfort. But if they see that this is a natural and good researched process, that it's not their failing, that's why they're uncomfortable, but that they're actually like stepping out of their comfort zones, I think that's really helpful. But there are definitely students that we're going to do steps 1, 2, and 3, and in 1, 2, and 3 many times.
I love that. I don't know who to attribute this to, but I remember learning a framework in undergrad that was talking about it was 3 concentric circles with comfort zone being in the middle and then learning zone and then panic zone.
Mm,
And the exercise that we went through as a group, they had put down ropes to make those. So it was really big and there's 20 students in the class and they
mm,
read off, maybe 15 or 20 different um, scenarios, and they said, based on the scenario I'm describing, go to the circle that would best fit how this experience would be for you. And so it
mm,
was really eye-opening to see how one experience might put someone squarely in comfort zone and others, they're jumping all the way to panic zone for the same exact experience. And so
mm, mm,
as a person, in your role where you're needing to design these experiences, but actually kind of have everybody go through the same experience, but they're
mm,
not all going to receive that experience in the same way. Are there ways that you kind of can help individual students kind of pull, hey, I see this is maybe pushing you too far. This is putting
mm,
you into panic zone. There's actually not really much learning that's happening. You need to get back to some safety.
mm,
And then others where you're like, come on, get out a little bit more.
mm,
And again, I think the experiences can do this on their own, but a good guide can help kind of curate that experience. Are there ways that you've seen that show up where you're pulling and pushing?
That's such a good question. I think, as you referenced before, like if an experience is worth doing, then it's worth debriefing. Equally as true is it also requires a good orientation.
Mm,
So, in our context where we have a lot of different mental health diversities of experiences and really histories of trauma, using a trauma informed lens to see that some students are going to react based on trauma that they've been through is really important. And so having a team with Res Life staff and others that kind of can tell the difference between someone is kind of reacting based on kind of a trauma response, then we want to allow them to have safe processing and kind of space. Whereas someone else, they might visually be quiet, but if you ask them, what are you thinking or how are you feeling, then it takes a lot of discernment, really. But I think the orientation phase is what allows us to know our students well. So none of our students get on a public bus on day 1 alone. So we have weeks. Our orientation phase is 2 full weeks. And so we're traveling on buses together, we're learning together. And then when they start independent internships, that reflection can be a little bit more academic and it can be delayed. Um, but yeah, it's a great question. And everyone does need to be pushed and pulled differently and uniquely. And I think that's the gift of making sure you do things as a team and not from just a single personality trait. But using the diversity of your team to discern when to push and pull and allow exceptions for our students is really important.
For sure. I mean, yeah, you're not nobody is above kind of our own biases and our own preconceived notions that you're going to read into an individual student and how they're reacting your own experience as a faculty member, and you're going to say, "Oh, come on." Like on our worst days that can seep out. And so to your point about having a team with some diverse experiences that can come together and help meet students at different places along the way is really really critical.
Mm,
Well, I think for folks that are listening to this podcast, hopefully they're in a few different camps. Some might be actively leading short term experiences. Maybe they're a professor leading a short term trip. Maybe they're a program director or a site director abroad. Or maybe they're based in the US at a US college or university, responsible for advising students as they go out, or even curating a portfolio of study abroad options that are available to their students. There's
mm,
people coming at experiential learning from a lot of different angles,
mm,
to ensure that students can have a good, a really good, helpful, growing, stretching experience where they come back to your point about transformed, and then also some of that balance that's appropriate. We don't want to just send students out. They have a really disorienting experience, and they come back and they don't know what to do with it. They don't know
yeah,
where to put it. And
yeah.
so these processes of orientation and debrief and having it be based on some of these frameworks and theories is really really critical. So hopefully folks as they're listening to this are beginning to understand, hey, I should be applying some of this theory
Mm,
to my work, or maybe this was something I learned about, 10 20 years ago, or back in the 80s, or whenever this was some of these things were first published, that maybe it's worth brushing off and reminding ourselves about some of these frameworks. So
mm.
yeah, that's just a little bit as I'm even hearing you talk through this. Hopefully, some of the application for our audience.
I love that. It's lifelong learning, baby. We have to just keep growing, keep being willing to learn from our students. I think one other closing point for me is the gift of like authentic learning from our students is profound in how it creates this like posture of mutuality. And I think the academy is starting to figure it out that the more that we like accompany and walk alongside our students, and for me, I've worked in secular, not faith-based institutions, and now I'm so grateful to be in a faith-based context where I can be praying alongside students, having students pray for me, the gift of having my daughters in the process. My wife is also part of it. So it's this holistic mutual learning that really, at the end of the day, we're all being transformed by this invitation of what God's inviting us to. So,
I love that. Such a good encouragement. Well, hey, thank you so much, Micah, for joining us today and sharing some of this. We'll include show notes to the Art of Crossing Cultures as well, that book, Micah, that you referenced. And the Christian Study Abroad podcast, we're here really trying to advance Christian study abroad globally. And so that's our aim and that's our goal. And the invitation is that those that are out there that are saying, hey, I want to be a part of that, they would have a place to join the community. And so we're running a conference this April 15 to 17, 2026 in Lakeland, Florida at Southeastern University. And we invite you to come and join us there. There's a forthcoming academic journal. This podcast is an ongoing conversation with those that are serving as leaders in this field. And so it's all in service of our students, and hope to give them a really remarkable experience as they come. So thanks again, Micah. And yeah, we'll talk soon, brother.
thank you, Greg.